Well, we talked about a few of them. We didn't talk about too many. I think the biggest one is still the excessive amount of tonnage in the industry. We went on a building spree and a buying spree, which to some extent is still going on, in the years before the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2007, 2008. And you'll remember Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. It all started here in the United States, but it was the tipping point that drove almost all sectors of the commercial shipping industry into a major recession. And certainly, I'm going to be 75 in 2 months, but in my career over more than a half century in shipping, this is the worst recession we've had. It's also the longest. That, to me, is the biggest single challenge, getting past the oversupply, the glut of tonnage in major areas such as tankers and dry bulk, just to name two. There are many other challenges. The second challenge that if I may jump to number two, is what we talked about a little bit just now in our panel discussion up there, and that is regulation. It is very costly. It is hard to measure what the cost will be. And for companies that are either in the shipping industry and have been for, in some cases, centuries, or other investors who are trying to weigh the advantages or disadvantages of investing in shipping, including hedge funds, one of the biggest challenges is definitely going to be to measure whether the cost factors of regulation. We talked about ballast water management, which is invasive species and the control of the use of water for ballast for ships. We also can talk about pollution, air pollution, the sulfur cap, as we refer to it. We have a lot of unknown unknowns, as a famous American defense secretary once said. One of the unknown unknowns is what the effect of the Trump administration's withdrawal from the Paris negotiations, the ongoing Paris deal on air pollution by ships, and indeed, well, in the case of Paris, it's everything. It's global, and it's not just shipping. But shipping is a part of that. For a long time, shipping sought not to be a part of it. I think we now accept that we, as an industry, must do our part to control emissions from ships. There are a lot of ways to do it. The hopeful thing, the good thing, is that we as a nation, the United States of America, are now, as you heard this morning, the biggest single exporter of oil and gas in the world, as a nation, not as a region, but as a nation. We're exporting more than Saudi Arabia, believe it or not, and most of it, of course, is shale. Shale production is very high. Gas production is very high. Why do I mention this? Because in the environmental concept of a sector, the use of natural gas, which is happening here in New York City as a fuel, it's much cheaper because we've got a lot of it here in America. The world has a lot of it. And we also have, not only is it cleaner, cheaper, but it's cleaner. Two things. This means, and I didn't ask this question, but if we had a longer panel discussion, I would have, is that we're moving away from the diesel engine. Now, I speak not as an expert, not as an engineer, but as a lawyer and a generalist. But I was chairman of NAMEPA before Joe Hughes, the North American Marine Environment Protection Association. And we began a long time ago to see that the diesel engine, while it's not going to die, is being redesigned in certain ways as either a dual fuel, mixed fuel, or as a natural gas, LNG, or LPG, liquid petroleum gas, burner. All of those are cleaner than what we call residual fuels, which is basically what we used to call bunker C, the most unrefined of all the oil products. It's like burning tar. So ships are getting cleaner. Air pollution is being tackled. How that is going to affect the design of ships, we know it's going to affect their capacity to carry cargo, because the new engines and the storage, actually the actual storage for gas, takes up more space on a commercial ship, particularly a container ship, than the old-fashioned sludge that we've been burning for most of the 20th and into the 21st century. So it means that the ship of the future, which is coming very fast, is going to look a lot different, and it's going to be technically a lot different in terms of how these ships operate. And as you heard from Kathy Metcalf a few minutes ago, of the Chamber of Shipping, the actual operation of a ship is much more complex and sophisticated, just like your car. And that means that the seafarers of today and tomorrow are going to have to be much better trained and more sophisticated, just as all of us are now, to just handle all the technical equipment we do in our daily lives. But for ships, this is a very big change, and for the maritime industry. And the great unanswered question is, how do we train these people? These are the people on the bridge, and these are the people in the engine room. It's going to be like training airline pilots. It's a big, big change qualitatively and intellectually. Up to now, if you ask me that question today, which you are, I would say the most important thing is the stock exchanges, the NASDAQ, initial public offerings, of which there have been very few in the shipping industry, but I think they're coming back. I believe they are. Others may differ. And I think that for New York, first of all, we are still a major seaport. We are one of the third biggest seaport in the United States, which means basically in North America. Singapore is a bigger seaport by far than New York. London, however, which is also a major financial center and legal center, is not a seaport at all. There are plenty of seaports in the British Isles, but not around London. Each major shipping center, whether it's Singapore, Piraeus, London, New York, and a number of Japanese ports, name one, Shanghai, has a different quality and feature or group of features. Ours is as an arbitration center, in other words, dispute resolution, as a legal center, as a transactional center. Ships are bought and sold here. The major shipping registries, Liberia and the Marshall Islands, are based in not so much New York, but in the United States. And most of our business is done in New York. It may not appear to be the case because everything is linked. Shipping is a global industry. I'm going to say a little bit of that for about a minute during lunch, which is namely that it's not all about New York, it's not all about Piraeus, it's about how all of these major shipping and minor shipping centers, Dubai is coming on rapidly. Shanghai certainly is becoming a major shipping center. It is one and has been for a long time. Those centers all work together. And what we see, and I see in my business, which is ship registries, is that a single deal to buy or sell a ship, or to record a mortgage, or to register a ship, or to paying cargo, involves not only a long supply chain, because you have counterparties, you have cargo, you have charterers, you have a whole series of parties in interest every time a cargo container moves and every time a ship moves. These are interlinked. We cannot exist as an industry without one another. New York is dependent on China. China is dependent on Singapore. Singapore is a transshipment point, as you probably know, for containers from all over the world. Ships drop them off in Singapore, they're picked up and taken somewhere else. There is a tremendous linkage. The important thing is to realize that all of these, including the taxation systems, have got to be friendly to international trade. And we now find, and we are concerned, that the Trump administration may not be as friendly to international trade as it is to protectionism. We think protectionism is a great threat to shipping and has been for 400 or 500 years. Mercantilism. We want to facilitate the free movement of money, cargoes, and all of the transactions that involve a very complex and exciting industry. And And to do that requires the World Trade Organization, it requires the International Maritime Organization, it requires international cooperation. I have to say that one of the things that has happened in recent years, certainly since in the last year, since Mr. Trump took office, is that some questions are now being raised as to whether the United States is fully committed and has a full understanding of that system.
Okay, and how do you see today's forum?
Today's
Forum.
I mean, that we're going through now. I'm a big supporter, we are big supporters of Maritime Forum.
Say that because, in front of the camera.
It is an enormous success. It takes a lot of work on the part of the Capital Link personnel. It's been very successful. It's successful in Greece. I don't know, you have attended a great many Capital Links, so you know that of all of the international programs that exist, where we gather to talk about ship finance, for example, this is the most successful. It's also the largest